Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 46 of the Fair Housing Insiders. I'm your host, Jonathan Sarr, and today we have a very special guest with us today, Mary Ross from Ross Business Development. So we're looking forward to having an amazing conversation about hoarding. Now, Mary is the president of Ross Business Development. You can learn more about her at her website, rbdnow.com. And she is the nation's premier provider of HUD multifamily housing compliance training and policy development products. So be sure to check her out. We'll have her website in the show notes. And just as another quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, be sure to sign up for our newsletter so you never miss out on episodes such as this. It keeps you in tune with not only these episodes, but any other items that we're highlighting to our community. And please follow us on our Instagram account at Fair Housing Institute. So today, Mary and I are talking about hoarding and the fair housing challenges that are associated with it. We've never talked about this, Mary, but first of all, again, welcome to the show. So nice to have you here with us. Looking forward to having this conversation with you today.
Well, we're looking forward to it too. I don't think there's enough conversation about hoarding and the fair housing impact on hoarding, but a lot of property managers ask a lot of questions. So I think this is a really great topic.
Absolutely. And a sensitive one too, because I know there's a lot of stigma sometimes around that topic and what people are dealing with from that perspective. So it'll be nice to hear what you've seen, how you're addressing some of these bigger questions, and provide our audience with a really high level overview. Because, like you said, there's just so much involved with this topic. So let's start with our first question. What is hoarding?
Hoarding is actually considered a mental disability, which is why we move into the fair housing arena. And it is basically a clinical diagnosis would say it's someone with an inability to let go of certain items. And they may have sentimental value, or they just may feel like it's something that they need, but there's a fear behind everything. And there's 5 levels of hoarding. That's one of the most important things that property managers need to know, is that you need to start recognizing hoarding at the earlier levels. Level 1's kind of difficult, but level 2 or level 3, because if you can stop it at that level, then certainly it doesn't get as bad as a level 5, which I think is what most people hear about is the worst case scenario, where there's things like feces on the floor and rooms become unusable, that kind of a scenario. So what we'd like to do is talk a little bit about how to recognize the earlier stages.
Right. Very good. Nice overview and timely too, because there's so much conversation about mental health challenges and mental health awareness. That this is one, as property management professionals, we don't want to ever kind of like brush this under the rug. It's just as important as all the other ones that are being talked about. So thank you for providing that overview. So let's dive in for a second from the perspective of the property management company. Like, what are some issues that arise for a management company when they find a resident that has this kind of disorder?
One of the problems is that property managers have learned to recognize that this is a disability, and property managers are often hesitant to make any strong moves when they know there's the presence of a disability. There's a lot of fear about dealing with reasonable accommodation and modification, especially with COVID. There's been a hesitance to enter an apartment. And if you don't enter an apartment, then you cannot discover hoarding in its early stages, and it gets to a really bad point before a property manager gets there. So one of the things that we've noticed is that owner agents sometimes have an absence of a policy to enter a unit periodically. Even during COVID-19, there's a way to have a resident move out and not move out, but get out, and the property manager come in. The other thing is that a lot of owner agents don't have clear definitions of what cleanliness is. There's a difference between somebody that is messy and then somebody that is, a hoarder. It really is a significant difference. And I think that with a property management firm, they don't even think about addressing hoarding until they have a problem. And it's usually a big problem. And we would strongly suggest a little upfront action that says you need to think about prevention before you get to a point where you're dealing with remediation.
Oh, I love that. Very good. Practical tip, like try and get ahead of the problem. So yeah, thank you for that, Mary. That's great. So, the reason, one of the obviously the big reasons, other than wanting to have you on the show for the longest time, but we want to talk about fair housing now. So like,
Right.
where does fair housing really come into play for property management when they know that they have a tenant or a resident that has a hoarding issue?
Well, for us, property management or fair housing training in property management includes all of the 7 federally protected categories. But we have always encouraged everybody to have special training regarding reasonable accommodation and modification, and recognize that there are more than just the standard disabilities that people think about, like mental disabilities or physical disabilities. Sometimes there's a combination that what physicians will say is it presents in a certain way. So really, hoarding is really a manifestation of OCD sometimes. That's what brings on hoarding. And that's not the only mental disability that brings on hoarding, but just an example of one. And so when we look at reasonable accommodation and modification, what you tend to see is somebody backing off. And what you really have to do as a property manager is understand that every single reasonable accommodation has its own special practices. So when you're looking at hoarding and addressing hoarding, you have to say, okay, I know that this is a person with an obvious or known disability. That comes right into your head. And fair housing tells you to recognize that.
Right.
And so you have to say, I need to make sure that we're making the resident understand that they have a right to a reasonable accommodation. And that's where things seem to fall apart. It's a situation where you have to advise the resident. And the best way to do that is to have special documentation that says, if you need assistance, let us know. These organizations can assist you. We will be happy to contact them for you. So if you get into a situation where you're in litigation, that you can present your case and say, we tried everything we could to address this issue, but it is still interfering with the peaceful enjoyment of the property by other residents.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes with fair housing, property managers get focused on the person that is protected, and sometimes they don't remember that everybody else has rights as well. And that can certainly be a challenge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's good I'm glad you brought that out. Like, it's not just the individual. There's just so many other factors that have to be in play.
Mm-hmm.
So good. I think we followed a really nice path here, so issues that come up for property management, kind of a nice overview of where fair housing comes into play. So now the next logical question that will come from all of our community is, okay, so we know this is going to happen. It's very realistic that it could happen. So what are some policies that we should have in place to deal with residents who are hoarding?
Well, the policies that we recommend for the owner agents that we work with are very different depending on whether or not you have a conventional property with no federal funding or you have an affordable property with federal funding, because the rules are a little bit different. So for a conventional property, we would make sure that notices are set in place, not to say hoarding per se, because we would never use that specific term any more than we would say because you're blind. We wouldn't say because you're a hoarder. In that situation, we would make sure that they had very clear documentation that addresses the lease violations and potential resolutions to the lease violations, including making sure the lease says what it's supposed to do. From a federally funded point of view, we're using a lease that's provided by the federal government, which already talks about decent, safe, and sanitary. So you look at, has the owner agent developed the appropriate notices to comply? Once hoarding is identified, and once again, we find that property managers do not start addressing it soon enough, training to make sure that property managers understand the levels and when they should step in is really important. Once again, with the proper notifications. And then we also implement something from a unit inspection point of view that says, okay, annual inspections are the norm. We come in once a year, make sure the unit's okay, doesn't need to be repainted, nothing needs to be replaced, etc. But if we have a situation where the unit is not maintained in accordance with the lease, which we're very specific about, then we implement a more frequent unit inspection policy. So depending on the level, it might be quarterly instead of yearly, and then that adjusts based on positive results of a unit inspection.
Okay, very good. Thank you for all that. And thank you for also highlighting the differences between, conventional housing and affordable housing. And before we're getting, setting up for the show today, you were talking about some of the training and stuff that your company does. And I was just imagining, we talk about this often, Mary, on our show, just like these are all good practical steps, but it is so important to incorporate these situations into your training, or, work with a company like you that provides that for, that's unique to that, because especially for all the new ones coming into the industry, we don't want to blindside them with, okay, well, what do I do in this situation? So policies are good, but it's also so important to have practical training, either in person or online training, to make sure that those things are reinforced.
I would agree with that.
Thank you so much. This is like fast paced, like boom, boom, boom. We got this discussion taken care of.
You said we were short on time, so.
Yeah, no, it's good. And, and I think we'll get so much feedback from the community. So we look forward to your comments and questions that you have. So remember to do that. If you have any questions, please post that in the YouTube channel or on the blog or any of the social posts that we share. So, Mary, again, thank you so much for being on the show. And we wanted to involve you in one of the fun things that we've instituted for 2022. So are you up for a 60-second fair housing fast five game to play along?
I am.
You are? Okay, cool. All right, let me get my fancy phone stopwatch up here. And so how this game goes, Mary, is, you win 1 quintillion fake dollars if you can get it under 60 seconds. That's a lot of fake possibilities. So, do your best. We look forward to it. But it's always fun because we know fair housing, man, you can go on and on with some of these questions. So, looking forward to hearing your feedback on our fast 5 questions for today. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. So what do we do if the resident will not allow access to the unit?
Well, once again, a little different between conventional and affordable. Affordable properties would mandate entry into the unit. So if the resident will not allow entry into the unit in an affordable property, the result would be termination of tenancy, which is eviction under normal rules.
Very good. Thank you. How many times may a resident request a reasonable accommodation?
There is no limit to the number of times a resident can request a reasonable accommodation.
Okay. Are owner agents responsible for contacting an agency to help the resident?
Under affordable housing, the answer would be yes. Under conventional housing, the answer is no, although we would consider that a best practice to be presented if there is any litigation.
Perfect. What's the biggest difference between conventional properties and federally funded properties?
Conventional properties are subject to the Fair Housing Act, while affordable properties are also subject to the Section 504, which would require the owner agent to pay for resolution of hoarding, where a conventional property manager could charge the tenant.
Beautiful. What is the biggest mistake property managers make?
Not addressing hoarding issues soon enough.
So close.
No.
So close. You almost won the 1 quintillion cajillion fake dollars, but that was amazing. 1 minute, 15 seconds. That's huge. So thank you for sharing that. And I know everyone will take note of the those answers and be able to use them. So just as a reminder to our community, please share this with your team. We're sure this will provide some nice background to this topic if you're choosing to talk about it in-house. So again, Mary, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been an absolute genuine pleasure to have you. We look forward to having you back on again in the future if you're up for it.
Thanks, Jonathan. I look forward to that as well.
All right, very good. So thanks everyone for tuning into our show. We thank you for your support. Please give our show a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, and we want your feedback. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. So until next time, take care, everyone.